Hi, well, we're in week 8, and this week we're going to bring together what we've been looking at in weeks 3 up to 7. We're going to be looking at how to prepare an income statement and a balance sheet. The standard problem we've got is we've got a trial balance after all postings, all the transactions have been posted, and we've got to produce a balance sheet and an income statement from this trial balance and a load of adjustments that we dealt with a couple of weeks ago. Now, there's basically 2 ways of doing it, and in this chapter, in this session, I'm going to be showing you both ways of doing it. Method 1 is by what's called extended trial balance, and method 2 is by simply pluses and minuses. But if you really want to understand accounting, financial accounting, you've really got to understand the debits and the credits. Now, the way it works is this. An extended trial balance has got it's basically a trial balance that we've prepared after all transactions. The figures appear in 2 columns, debit and credit. And then in the extended trial balance, we've got 3 other pairs of columns. Each of the pairs is headed debit and credit. The first pair is for the adjustments. The second pair is for income statement, and the third pair is for balance sheet. Now, basically what we do is this. In the adjustments pair of columns, we do a debit and a credit for each of the adjustments. So let's go back to one we dealt with some weeks ago, the £200 accrual for electricity. And what we do is we debit electricity £200 and we credit accruals £200. Now, when we've done all the adjustments, so I'm just going to talk about that one, if we do all of them, the debits and the credits on the adjustment columns in total will agree, because we've done a debit for every credit. And then what we do is this. We work out the balance on each of the T accounts, each of the lines on the trial balance. So electricity, we've got electricity paid in the very first column, 1,000, and we've got another debit of £200 in the adjustment column. The total of that is £1,200. And then we say this debit of £1,200, is it an expense? If it is, it appears as a debit in the income statement columns, or is it an asset, in which case it appears as a debit in the balance sheet columns? Obviously, electricity is an income statement debit, it's an expense. And then we look at the accruals line in the trial balance. It's got nothing in the after all postings section. It's got a credit balance in the adjustments section. Credit of 0 plus a credit of 200 equals a credit of 200. The net result of that line in the extended trial balance is a credit balance of 200. Is accruals an income statement credit? It is if it's a revenue. Or is it a balance sheet credit? It is if it's a liability. Accruals is a liability. So it is extended in as a balance sheet column credit. Now, effectively what we do is this. We do a debit and credit for each of our adjustments. We work out the net result of each line in our trial balance. If you like, take a ruler to each line. You work out the balance. If it's a debit balance, you decide, is it an expense, income statement? Is it an asset, balance sheet? With the credits, if it's a revenue, it's an income statement credit. If it's a liability, it's a balance sheet credit. And then you add up the balance sheet columns and the income statement columns. The income statement columns are likely to have more credits than debits, more revenues than expenses. And the difference between the total revenues and the total expenses, that is the profit for the year. And with the balance sheet, the debits, which will be the assets, are likely to exceed the credits, the equity plus the liabilities, by the same figure. And the meaning of that figure is it is the increase in the retained profits for the year. And then you simply do this. You write out a pro forma income statement, which we learned in session 1.2, in week 2, and a pro forma balance sheet, which we learned the same week, and you simply copy all the income statement figures in the income statement columns in the trial balance onto an income statement in the appropriate order, and the assets and liabilities into the balance sheet from the balance sheet columns in the trial balance. And in that way, you produce a set of accounts. You've got your transactions, trial balance, you've got your adjustments, a debit for every credit. You work out the net result of each line. If it's an income statement figure, it goes into the income statement. If it's a balance sheet figure, into the balance sheet. The second way of doing it is, in a sense, exactly the same. But what you do here is you simply take the trial balance and you add to this figure and you add to that figure. I would have added 200 to electricity and added 200 to accruals, and then you work it out simply by pluses and minuses. The extended trial balance is by far the best way of doing it, the real way of doing it, but it is more time consuming. I admit that. But I feel that at first you should learn how to do it by extended trial balance, and in that way you will master double entry bookkeeping. Every debit has a credit, and you will master it that way. But once you know what you're doing, like hopefully I do, you can do it by a shortcut, by pluses and minuses. Anyway, this is a very important week, and so it's vital that you get to grips with this. I can assure you there'll be something like this in the exam. Anyway, have a good week, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.